and gentlemen, tonight I had Brian Widmer to give our invocation, and turns out his son was sent home from school today, and we are afraid it may be COVID-related, so he will be back to join us in March, and I've asked Mr. Larry Bradley to give our invocation.
Would you bow with me, please? Father, we're just so thankful tonight for the opportunity to be here, to do the city's business, and with that, your business. Lord, we just ask you to be with us and the deliberations, the decisions we have to make tonight. Always keep in mind that what we're doing is for the benefit of the city, not for individuals. Lord, to just guide us in all that we say and do, and have us make the right decisions as we go forward. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Good evening, everybody. We'll call this meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock of our first meeting of the new year. Let the record reflect that all members of the council are present, and I believe Ms. Crawford, is joining us by telephone. Mayoshi, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great, glad to have you. Also, Mr. Boyce, it's your very first meeting. Glad you're here. Thank you for coming. We'll move straight into the approval of the agenda, please. I need a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gregory. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. This might be the smallest consent agenda we've ever had. Moving to the approval of the consent agenda for last month's minutes for the council work session and the council regular session.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Little. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to public comments. I do have Mr. McDaniel here as our sole public comment tonight.
My name down to talk about something else from here, but it's not really public comment. It's one of the contingency plans for development on my road.
Okay, 1 second. Which one is that? Is that the rezone or is that River Point? Do we have
We have a public hearing.
We do have a public hearing on that one. Okay, we'll come to you. All right, thank you for being here, Mr. McDaniel. Other than that, we have no public comments. We'll move straight into the city administrator report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just hit a few things from my list that's in your packet. Foremost, we'll have upcoming redistricting to work on. I'll call you all to have a special work session at some point, probably later this month, so we can get that underway. We've been working with the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission on the maps, which is based off of the 2020 census data. So I'll be in touch very soon on setting that date for you all. We're going to reissue the RFP for the, we're going to issue the RFP for a Blaine Station probably later in the first quarter for that development that you've already approved, that master plan. Milner ACOT building, we will re-release that one once we get some additional remediation underway. We had a little bit of a water issue there. That'll be taken care of with our insurance over the next few weeks.
Do you have a projected timeline on release of?
I would like to get it.
request for proposal?
I would like to get it back out by the end of the month if we could. Some of that's dependent on how quickly we can get some of that remediated. It's not terrible. It just takes a little bit of work to make it show a little better than it currently does. On the planning and code side, our comprehensive plan is underway. Sadie, do you want to give any update to that element?
Yes, the online survey is available. Please encourage anyone you know to go to monroe-compplan.com. That's where that pops up. You can take that. Soon we'll have an announcement that kind of shows up on our website that also will direct people there. It's also on our website, but kind of buried in pages. We just want as many people as possible to take that. And then this Thursday evening is our first public engagement meeting. It's at 6 p.m., the factory at Walton Mill. There are paper flyers in the lobby area right outside. That's open to anybody in the public. This is the first visioning session that the consultants will be doing, so please encourage people to attend. We'll be able to space out there, and they'll guide us through that process, and this will be the starting point of what they use and take back to the steering committee of citizens to then help interpret that information from the public and fit it into our comprehensive plan, so.
Thank you. Additionally, staff will be working on code updates and cleanup. We're always trying to better some of our codes and just clean up some conflicting languages. We'll probably also be engaging with Hall Consulting, who's working on our comp plan, some additional training with our Planning and Zoning Commission and Historic Preservation Commission, just to stay up to date on all matters of the law. We'll be posting an additional marshal position soon, just reworking some job description elements there. On the traffic calming side, the Phase 2 implementation, which includes West Highland, Barrett, North Midland, sections of South Madison, and Felker Streets, that will be bid on January 30th, and will probably be before you on March 8th for selection, with construction shortly thereafter. Hopefully construction can wrap up by midsummer. Downtown Green, we're very close to releasing that bid. It's under final engineering right now, just tweaking a couple design elements, such as sidewalk and drainage, things of that nature. And that is probably all I need to report on tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Probst. Any
We-
que-
I have a question.
That's okay.
On that Phase 2 implementation of the traffic calming,
Yes.
have we been provided a copy of that? Did I miss?
I will get it to you. It just came in my inbox this afternoon, so,
Okay.
yeah, I'll get it to you.
Are there any questions for Logan?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am?
I can hear Lee fine. If everyone else can speak into the mic a little closer, please.
I'm sorry. Hang on. We might have to translate. One more time?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I can hear Lee just fine, but I can barely hear everyone else.
Okay. And maybe you will be able to hear better now that we've got the mic closer to your speaker.
Okay, thank you.
Moving, are there any other questions for Logan? Thank you, Mr. Probst. Moving to Chris Bailey, Assistant City Administrator update.
Thank you, sir. Couple of quick points. Logan had mentioned Blaine Station, the RFP going out, the actual exterior of the building. We are pretty close to complete. We have a meeting Thursday at 9 in the morning to kind of go over different things. It's final painting of the window trim, the door trim, and then, of course, kind of waiting for a few more caps to come in for the roof and the edge, but that looks much, much better. Thursday, they will be pressure washing the sidewalk area and whatnot around that building. And then to jump over to the airport, I'm pretty sure everybody had seen where there was an infrastructure bill passed through the state, through the federal government to the states. It was $25 billion that was given to airports across the country. $17.3 million was dedicated to general aviation, and what it does is it provides us with a double income of AIP funding on a yearly basis for the next 5 years. So in 2022, Monroe's actually received an additional $160,000. That'll just require us to have a 5% match. The good thing is we can use that towards terminal building, safety improvements, taxiway improvements, and we're getting ready to actually put out to bid a terminal building, which should come before you guys in March for approval. So that should help us cushion the blow a little bit with increased prices on everything right now, construction related. So it kind of offsets that difference. Our maintenance hangar is moving forward too. We should have final plans to actually give to the independent, kind of the contractor that's building that, the company that's going to start and actually run the maintenance hangar. At which point we'll review lease agreement, get that with the attorneys, and then probably have that back before you, hopefully in February, but maybe March is a little bit more of an accurate time frame. Parks, we got back final drawings for the restrooms that are coming to Matthews and Pilot. Look for those to probably be installed sometime maybe in March or April. weather is gonna kinda dictate that. Also, in the report on the parks at the end in the packet is the lake survey that was done of Matthews. It's kind of surprising. The deepest point in that lake was only 8 feet. Most of everything around the perimeter, it was no more than 2 to 3 feet. You know, the fish that was actually in the pond is, you know, much smaller than ideal, just because they don't have any place to like habitat and to basically escape predators and whatnot. But the company that did that's actually putting together a proposal to come in and start managing, maintaining, give us some options to going forward. Solid waste, streets 2 at this point. We're going ahead and jumping into the CIP of things with a commercial garbage truck, recycling truck that we're looking at, a residential garbage truck potentially, trailers and whatnot. We're trying to get ahead of what is going to be nothing outside of a delay in getting equipment and materials for the year. So we wanted to jump on that early in the year. They've been working on that predominantly this week. There is a yellow door hanger sitting at your desk in front of you. That's what we'll be putting on doors as we pick up recycling material, and Danny May can kind of jump in on this. If items are bagged and put in the recycling bin, or if they're wires, different things, if things aren't necessarily clean, we're going to hang these on doors to remind people that the items need to be loose. It needs to be the proper materials that we actually accept on recycling in the bins and whatnot. This past year, we had actually started a little bit of a campaign on Facebook where we were pushing out information for what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And we'll start that back up in tandem with this, so we can help remind as many people as possible. Other than that, the holiday schedule for solid waste will be adjusted this coming week. Tuesday will be Monday's normal route. Wednesday will catch Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday should be back to normal. So, provided sickness and ailments and all the other things that we're dealing with right now with short staff and everything should stay on that schedule, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Before there are any questions for Chris, Chris, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Smith about the cards? Are there any questions for Mr. Bailey? Danny, I'll go ahead and jump in and tell you, y'all are rock stars. I know you've been working double duty and kind of with half staff, and just to keep up at all has been impressive. I appreciate your guys' work. Moving to police department requests. Chief Watts.
Thank you, Mayor. What we're bringing before the council tonight is the approval to purchase the flock camera system. This is an item that we budgeted for already for 2022. And what this will be is a 16 camera system that will be utilized throughout the city on any entrances and exits into the city and out of the city. And what it does, it tracks the vehicles that come in and out, which will be a huge force multiplier for us. There's 153 agencies already in the state of Georgia that use it. We'll be able to network with them. I know of 2 incidents that our agency has utilized it, and it's helped us. One was in Newton County. We were looking for a vehicle that was involved in one of our homicides. The flock system picked it up, which alerted Newton County, where they were able to stop the vehicle, and we were able to get the suspect that we were looking for to interview. The second incident was when we started having the catalytic converter thefts. We suspect an individual that was involved in that, and he was taking these catalytic converters to a recycling center in Snellville, and we were able to reach out to Snellville, and they were able to tell us that his vehicle that we were looking for has been coming to Snellville on a regular basis in the area. So this is I think it's going to be a great system for us. It's an annual contract. The startup cost is $44,000, and then every year after that is $40,000. And of course, I think after a year's time, we can look at it and see how it's been beneficial to us and decide if we want to continue to go forward with utilizing the system. But again, like I said, most agencies around us already are utilizing it, you just don't realize it. You know, you're being tracked by your vehicles already, and it's just gonna be, again, a force multiplier for us. Also, any Amber Alerts or something of that nature. If they put out something like that on GCIC, you know, you get those on your phones and stuff. This system, every one of these officers will have a login, and if that vehicle that's being looked for, whether it's Amber Alert or if it's a vehicle that's being looked for involved in a crime committed, you know, around here or even out of state, it'll immediately alert all those officers are on duty and let them know, hey, that vehicle just came into the city of Monroe. So it's another good deterrent for crime, and I'm excited to see how it's going to benefit us over the next year.
Thank you, Chief Watts. Are there any questions for me?
Can you go over the source of funding?
Yes, it is capital. It is, like I said, it's already been budgeted for the 2022 for this year. So we did allot funds for that, for the purchase. Originally, it was in investigative supplies, but Beth showed us the other day where we need to put it in capital, so.
David?
Ready to make a motion?
Not yet. Are there any other questions?
This is like a lease.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Do all the maintenance.
That's exactly right. So I don't know if y'all remember years ago when we bought the license plate readers on the back of the car, those 2 cameras then were about $25,000. This is 16 cameras that we will have. If you were to buy this outright, it would probably be astronomical what it would cost us. So it is a lease program, and again, it's on a yearly basis.
And what are what's it searching for? Is it searching
It's just running the tags. So it's kind of like what we did with the Red Speed, the school zone care. It's going to just the tag. So if something is put out on GCIC, NCIC, saying, you know, this Ford Taurus, Georgia tag, whatever, is wanted in connection with an armed robbery or a murder or something, that information is put out there. Instead of us, the old school way is we would get bolos from the 911 center that would say, be on the lookout for this vehicle. This is just giving us,
It actually sees it.
it's giving us 16 sets of eyes into our city, so anything that comes within the city limits here, it'll let us know if it's in our perimeter, and then alert us on which camera system they went by, so we can start moving in on that area.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, David.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Dickinson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Larry Bradley. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Back to Chief Watts, scrap vehicles.
Yes, this is 11 vehicles that have been decommissioned from our fleet. I know Chris just told me he'll be glad when this gets approved so they can get them off the property down there at Public Works. But again, these are old police cars, 05s, 06, that engines don't work, transmissions don't work. The newer model vehicles have been wrecked, they're unrepairable. So just need approval to be able to go ahead and scrap the vehicles out.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gregory. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the preliminary plat review for River Point. Believe this one is asked to be tabled, correct?
Yes, Mayor, Mr. Clay
And-
Kirkley asked that we table it for one more month again as we complete development agreement negotiations.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to table.
Move to table.
I have a motion by Mr. Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the Corridor Commission Appeal for 1,000 East Spring Street. As we discussed this last week, last month, overturning the corridor design overlay rules where Mr. Eighth had come in and had it denied. I think we've been beating around this for a year or so. Then we talked about whether or not it was a one lot or two, whether or not he was building the same building as he had approved in 2017, whether or not he had to abide by the corridor design overlay. I couldn't let it go because I didn't know, after watching the previous meeting and going through minutes, did we give carte blanche? It seemed to me that we gave a kind of, you can do whatever you want. I talked with staff. They've been going through this for, a year. And we have some conflicting information, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Our design overlays, too important. Many of you were on the board that actually approved it originally in 2014. And all of you, save one, were on the board when the text amendment went through in 2019. Actually, save two. I think Wayne was here at the time, Tyler. So I would like, before entertaining a motion to overturn the veto, which I'm sure will come, I want to know what we're talking about. Do you all feel comfortable that we said it's one lot? Did we all feel comfortable saying you are in the CDO or you are out? Did we say you can put up a metal building, which is clearly not allowed in the CDO, but he says was approved in 2017, and I'm also seeing that it's not the same building. On the plan it says garage. I need to know what we're doing. I think it's only fair to our citizens that we address this on an entire basis. Do we need to have 3 or 4 different motions? One saying it's 2 lots, one saying forget the corridor design overlay, one saying metal buildings are fine in the CDO. I need to know what you want. And I'm sorry if it came across saying, hey, you all made the wrong decision. I just didn't know what your decision was. So let's maybe have questions for staff, and then we can revisit a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll begin on this, I guess, because I did come prepared to make a motion to override your veto.
I'm sure.
When I look at the code that we passed that you refer to, it was, along with the rewrite and the corridor overlay and all this together, a very voluminous, complex set of rules and regulations that I think are sometimes subject to interpretation. And I think the action taken by the Planning and Zoning Commission at the direction or at the guidance, if you will, of staff, may have been based on a very strict interpretation of those rules and regulations. I look at this, because it is a complex issue, I looked at it as what was the intent? What was the legislative intent at the time this was passed? What was and so I can tell you what I saw as my intent, and I think other members of the council, some members of the council at least, share the same thing with intent. I think at the time that we passed that, and currently, Monroe is a very attractive place for businesses to come into. And businesses were lining up to come in, and they still are. The corridors coming in are very attractive to people wanting to put new businesses in. And I think as we looked at all that, we said we want to be sure that as businesses do come in, that they meet certain criteria to be sure from an aesthetic standpoint and just an overall look of people that are traveling into our city and into and outside our city, through our city, see something that looks good with these businesses coming in. We want to be sure that if a business, for example, wants to build something, kind of thing, a new business comes in, wants to build a new restaurant, for example. I look at things that happened on West Spring Street, and we've certainly met this criteria with some of the businesses over there. But what I don't think our intent was to punish existing business owners and property owners that have been there for some period of time, that operate their businesses in such a way it has been for a long period of time, and they want to continue to operate that way and go forward with it. I think the strict interpretation of the staff in this particular one and in the planning and zoning has gone beyond that intent. I look at this particular instance that we're talking about right here, and I think that, number one, the addition that the property owner wants to put on this one is in the back of the lot, and I know that people say it's visible from Spring Street, and it probably is. If you find the right spot to stand and look through, you may see this, okay? I think it's not noticeable for anyone driving through the community, and it's more likely on Baker Street than it is on Spring Street. So I don't think it has any effect, any negative effect on the area by placing it in there, particularly the corridor. So I don't think that falls under the intent. I know that some of the conversation's been on this, that staff has told the property owner that the only way he could build this building and put it back there would be a complete overhaul of the entire property, of all the buildings that are there in the parking lot, and starting from scratch, like tear it all down, dig it all up, and start over again, which is not practical to someone trying to operate a business. So I try to look at the intent of the legislation that was passed. I don't feel like the decision that was made is within that intent, and so therefore, that was the reason I made the motion at the time to uphold the appeal and override the decisions made by planning and zoning.
Okay, so have we seen a site plan? You're telling me it can't be seen from Spring Street. I'm telling you, I don't know that we've seen a site plan. So can we realistically say, sure? Or does it need to be, this is the kind of thing, does it need to be remanded to the planning commission to look at again? Because I don't think we've seen a site plan. That's number one. Number two, back to the original intent of the veto, did we say it's okay to have two lots, or did we say he has to abide by CDO requirements of the lot, and did we say that a metal building is fine? Those are the four questions.
I wasn't addressing the four questions. I was addressing the decision made by planning and zoning to deny the application. And I think their denial was incorrect.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
as I told you after I was informed that you were going to veto the council's decision, I don't necessarily disagree with your veto. I'm very concerned about this situation because, number one, I don't think we had the kind of in-depth discussion at the previous meeting that we should have had before we voted on it. And I obviously wasn't present at the P&Z corridor committee meeting, so I don't know what they discussed. But this is the thing. When I pulled all of the regulations, the ordinance about the overlay districts and the corridor design overlay in particular, my perspective on it is that when we passed that, we were well-intentioned, and it's like a lot of legislation. It has all sorts of language in it that we think is really good, and then sometimes a situation comes up, and what you're actually dealing with, you find that maybe you've got some issues with your legislation. Maybe it creates situations that are unintended. It's what I call the law of unintended consequences. And you need to show some flexibility and, for lack of a better term, sometimes some common sense in dealing with it. So, applying that to Mr. Atha's property over there, which, as everybody knows, is the old McGarrity garage. Everything over there is a metal building. So starting with that concept and reading through, I just want to read into the record some of what's in our ordinance so that we can all hopefully get on the same page about this thing. All right, so it says that what the city wishes to focus upon is the compatibility of form, scale, massing, and materials such that new structures will conform to the neighboring community features and standards and more closely reflect the character of that, whatever that local community is. As I read that, if you're talking about metal buildings out there on the historic Garrity dealership garage, that's an apple. If you're talking about brick historic buildings in the downtown, that's an orange. So are we saying, okay, your apple's got to look like somebody else's orange? To me, that doesn't make any sense. So what else is in it? So we have another section that says that one of the things we're to look at is the pertinent features of other development and structures in the corridor. Well, where in the corridor? If you look at these corridors, they have very different structures and design elements depending on what section of the corridor you're talking about. And out on that end of the corridor, surrounded by metal, best I can tell, or something that doesn't look much different from metal. So then we go a little further. And using the 643A criteria, would the proposed change have a substantial adverse effect on the corridor or any structure therein? I didn't hear any discussion at our previous meeting about that whatsoever. Go a little deeper. And this is in section 643A. And it is subsection 1C. Architectural design should not be developed independent of context. Buildings should be integrated with, not isolated from, their surroundings. What does that mean? If it's surrounded by metal buildings and you build a brick building, isn't that out of context with what's around it? I don't know. I'm just saying. It's our ordinance. What did we mean when we enacted that? The next subsection, subsection 2 of that same 643A1, again talks about residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional properties within each proper context, which, as I read that, means you can have different context in different sections of the corridor. When we enacted this, did we intend that every single building on both of these main corridors is going to look exactly the same? I don't think so. Another subsection under there, under architecture. In general, new structures shall be designed consistent with traditional and historic features associated with the building type. What is the type building he proposes to build? It's a garage building.
It is a garage building.
There hasn't been
I believe it
a
says,
brick
that on the
garage
plans.
building constructed in this city and probably in this state in 50 years. Not a garage building. I'd be saying something very different if he owned the McGarrity before that or whatever it was, the dealership that was down here in the middle of town across from the Art Center. It is a brick building. So if Mr. Eighth came in and said, well, I want to stick a metal building back there on that vacant lot next to it, I'd say no, because what's around you is a different type of architecture. There's not a metal building next to it, adjacent to it. It would be out of context. Okay? So the one thing that everybody seems to be so fixed upon appears a little farther down in it. Lord, we got more subsections than we know what to do with. It'd be 643A21 sub C sub 7. Only a lawyer could like this. And it says this prohibition includes metal building types commonly known as Butler buildings. Well, Butler building, I think, is a trade name and proprietary, but putting all that aside, other than that, I don't see anything in there that, to me, would prohibit putting a metal building on this location. Now,
So it says metal buildings are prohibited.
it does. But that doesn't make
I
any
just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
It's in there. I agree with you, the language is in there. But I'm telling you, as a matter of common sense, in this particular situation, in this particular context, to me, that makes no sense. And I feel it's violative of the whole purpose of the statute. I really do. Now, what I would like to see is if we chose to allow this building to be built, I would like to see some of the amenities around it in terms of the other things that this ordinance talks about at great length. Break up all of that moonscape pavement, put in the planters and the trees and those kinds of things, and make it look better. I agree with Mr. Bradley. You'd have to work real hard to see this building from Spring Street, but it would be nice if that little section there in front of that looked better. I thought that was where we might be headed with it, but now I don't know. It seems like folks are kind of dug in and not talking about that. I think we need to have a discussion about that, but I don't know if that's appropriate. That was one of the things I wanted to ask the city attorney's opinion about. Can we modify it? Is this just an up or down vote? What are we doing?
I think this is just an up or down vote. One thing that could be taken would be a motion to table consideration of the mayor's veto. It's called that y'all must consider his veto within 30 days, but you're considering it today. I don't think there's anything in rules of order that would prohibit you from tabling consideration of the veto vote to a later date and perhaps give either staff and Mr. Probst or code office or myself and Mr. Benton, who's representing the applicant, time to discuss those issues of some sort of in-between opportunity to seek resolution to this that would include some of the things that you raised, Mr. Dickinson. But I think that if you're addressing the veto that's before you now under your charter, you just have a veto that's been put on place, and y'all's duty or opportunity is to override that veto with a supermajority vote within 30 days, which you have before you to consider. I don't think there'd be any problem with tabling that to the next meeting. I think that's your only options that I see.
All right, so let me, may I be heard on that, Mr.?
Absolutely.
To me, doing something like that makes sense. And I'd say that not, I don't believe in this kick the can down the road and maybe lightning will strike or something between now and the next time we look at it. I don't do business that way. But I think we all come out better when we work together if we can come to any sort of reasonable concurrence about what to do here. And I will say this, though. If you're going to do it as a straight up or down vote, my vote would be to overturn the veto. But that's not what I want to do. I want this thing to come out right. And I just think that we got problems with our ordinance a little bit. And I think this thing turned into sort of a thing of people getting dug in, and some comments have been made. And I'm blunt about stuff, folks, that I don't really care for. I don't make my decisions up here based on who the applicant is. I've spent 40 years in this community, taking some tough positions, and it ain't about who the applicant is. And you can go ask around if you're sort of a newcomer and you think that's how I do business. It ain't. So I look at the merits of it. I look at the legislation, and I try to do the right thing, and I think that's true of every member of this council. So, I ended my speech, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I thank you. If the city staff wants to reach back out to Mr. Atha before he puts the building up and try to work out something, that's fine. They have not been willing to do that in the past. So I'm gonna make the motion now that we override the veto.
I'm gonna second that motion.
Thank you. On the further discussion, with a motion and a second on the floor, I do want somebody to tell me what is being approved. Is it one lot? Is it ignoring CDO guidelines for landscaping sidewalks? Is it allowing a metal building, which it sounds like it is? I gotta have some input, because just randomly overturning it, do we give him carte blanche to
So
do?
what did the planning and zoning deny initially? That's the part we're overturning.
Okay, so,
Mayor, if I could interject, if
Yes,
Mr. Kelly wanted to just spell that out, what the application was for, Pat.
The application from Mr. Atha was to build a building, as described. I think it's a 60 by, a 30 by 60 building, 1,800 square feet, metal building. And I will say that during this discussion with the planning and zoning on the CDO, they did request and offer the opportunity to modify the site plan in order to try and get into compliance with the zoning ordinance and a little bit more, and it was roundly rejected. But yeah, the original application was to build a metal building. And the denial was for the certificate of appropriateness for the building. But the appeal was of the decision of the Corridor Commission to not issue a permit, which they had no purview on. So I really don't know what's been done in any.
Well, it would be, let me interject there. It's exactly what he said. Your corridor commission denied the certificate of appropriateness. Without that certificate of appropriateness, he can't issue a permit. So the technical issue that y'all overturned was their decision to deny the certificate of appropriateness to build a metal Butler building on that corner, I'll just say that corner of this parcel, okay? So the mayor then vetoed that, so then you have a motion on the floor that would overturn that veto, which would reinstate your overturning of the Corridor Design Overlay Commission, which would then, in effect, allow him to build a metal Butler building on that corner of the property. It doesn't mean that he still wouldn't have to file a permit and have to follow all codes and all those sort of things, but it would allow him to build a metal Butler building by that certificate of appropriateness essentially being issued by you via your overturning of their denial of that certificate of appropriateness, if that makes sense. And just to reiterate what Mr. Kelly said and to go to the issues of Mr. Dickinson, because I was involved in this file for quite a bit with Mr. Benton on behalf of Mr. Athas, there was a lot of discussion about the concept of compromise or middle ground to include appropriate landscaping, removals of moonscapes, buffering, green, all those sort of things. And there was never any real consensus or offer to address those issues.
So if we then overturn the veto, does that set in motion events where then Mr. Atha will have to apply for a permit and therefore submit his plans for what he intends to put on the property?
Yes, that's correct. But those requirements that are mandated underneath the corridor design overlay, I don't think would apply because the certificate of appropriateness has essentially been issued based upon the plans that he submitted, which, based upon my memory, it's been quite a minute, were simply to place the metal Butler building there in that southwest corner, can't remember, the corner of Baker and Hammond Drive, put the metal Butler building there, the corner of Baker and Hammond Drive, without any of those provisions of removals of moonscape, buffering, adding green space, et cetera, et cetera. He would still have to comply with, well, I guess he wouldn't have because it's already paved. There's no
And we
change in
can't
pervious
put
surface.
any conditions on this.
No, that time, that ship has sailed. That would have been back when you overturned their decision.
So when a building comes in for approval, there's no landscape requirement. It doesn't run with a lot, it's specifically the building.
I'm sorry, ask that question again. Let's see if I can.
So when it comes in for a permit of the building, no landscape plan has to be provided.
The landscape plan was supposed to have been provided in his application for certificate of appropriateness as part of his application to build a building subject to the corridor design overlay standards. It's my understanding no landscape plan was submitted. That was part of the basis for the denial. And y'all have overturned that denial of certificate of appropriateness, and now there's a motion on the floor to overturn your veto. So
With no landscape plan and no site plan was the reason it was denied?
I can't get it. I mean, Mr. Kelly's told you what, why it's denied. You have minutes from your corridor design overlay commission as to what they did. I was not there. I don't believe any of y'all were there. So the actual reasoning for why they overturned it or didn't overturn it, I cannot speak to. But I guess to answer your question, sort of the issue from Mrs. Malcolm of can you place conditions, I don't believe it's appropriate to at this point. I think that what's before you is the overturning of the mayor's veto. I think that if this veto is overturned, then our opinion would be that Mr. Atha would then be able to proceed forward with pulling his permit for the building of this building. He would still be subject to any other code regulations that are not contained within the corridor design overlay standards. But we don't have any landscaping metrics in, is this B3, I believe, Pat? Yeah, so I don't think there are any landscape standards in B3 other than those contained within the corridor design overlay standards. And so the overturning of the corridor design overlays appeal essentially waives, if I can use that word in simple parlance terms, the requirement of any landscape metrics.
Thank you. Wanted to ask, is part of the basis for this veto not knowing what we were talking about? And I'd like staff comment, Ms. Crozick?
I think we got a motion on the floor, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir, we have discussion after a motion and a second.
but we don't discuss it. There's discussions within the council.
Thank you.
Well, but point of order, the discussion is within the council, but the mayor has the authority, if he wants to inquire from staff as to the issues pending on the floor.
Ms. Crozick?
Since this question is really planning and zoning, I would prefer other staff.
Ma'am?
Since this is a question about interpretation of our zoning ordinance,
Thank you. I appreciate your synopsis yesterday. Mr. Callender?
I have nothing to offer other than the information that I provided to the mayor by email. Unless there was a specific question that I'm happy to try to answer about.
Well, is that letter went out yesterday, and there are times that things that are put in front of council may or may not have been read. I want them to understand your reasoning for denial, and I want them to also understand Patrick Kelly's reasoning for denial, because I think we just need to know. I'm not trying to be extra harsh. I just don't know. And I think that's the way we need to move forward. The more knowledge, the better.
But I think
No, sir.
everybody,
Mr. Callender?
I think everybody
No, sir,
actually
Mr.
got a
Garrett, the
chance
question is
to
not to
actually
you.
read your email.
It's not to you,
I don't
Mr. Garrett. I'm
think that
sorry, you are not being called
appropriate.
upon. Mr. Callender,
You're not
the
the only
question
one
is in
on
your
this council
court.
that can actually talk.
Mr. Callender?
So I don't think we need to
Mr.
keep
Callender,
wasting our
you're on the
time
floor, please, sir.
because you want to waste our
Mr.
time.
Callender, you're on the floor, please, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In light of like the discussion tonight, especially from Councilman Dickinson, about the intent of the corridor. Yeah, are there issues that probably need to be addressed within the corridors or ordinance itself? Absolutely. No ordinance is perfect. They're always dynamic and fluid and need to be changed and amended through time to adjust to conditions that are in the real world and the environment itself. Having been with the city only for a year and seeing the certain prohibitions that are outlined in the corridor overlay, in this case specifically the black and white text, metal buildings are prohibited, it's very easy for the staff to look at that ordinance itself and see the need for the change that's intended in the ordinance itself. And what I read into that specifically is that the prohibition of metal buildings would be the prohibition to allow new metal buildings. And in the ordinance that Councilman Dickinson read earlier, it did reference the context of neighboring properties. And if you look at the properties immediately surrounding this site, there are only 2 metal buildings anywhere in the vicinity near the property. One is an accessory building to the Monroe Motor Inn across the street, and that is an entirely brick facility that has a mini storage facility at the edge of the street built some 50 years ago. And then further down the street is another mini storage facility with orange doors. These are the only metal buildings in that entire vicinity of the area within several hundred feet of the property itself. And to me, when I read the ordinance, the intent of this metal building prohibition is using these properties as an example to actually prohibit further new buildings on any of these properties. And so immediately surrounding this site, there is brick and stone and stucco and all the immediate adjacent buildings, and none of which have metal except for the 3 that I mentioned. So if there's a need for the city to change the corridor itself, then the prohibition would stand for any new metal buildings issued regardless of where they're located in order to enhance and improve the corridor itself. The lack of language maybe in the ordinance itself is that it doesn't grant any grievance or leeway for an existing situation where there's an expansion on an existing property. Maybe that needs to be addressed specifically in the ordinance, but as it's written, it leaves staff with very little room to look outside of that ordinance and say, well, they're prohibited, so any new ones would obviously be in violation of this prohibition. And so our recommendation to the Planning Commission, or at least mine was, and then Pat's ultimately, was to recommend denial of the request because of that prohibition. Very simply because the desire to change that. Now, if we want to enhance our ordinance, obviously that's a walk down the road a little bit further where we look in our ordinance and make changes, obviously, to accommodate. That's what ordinances do. I mean, we have to make some amendments, obviously, not necessarily to accommodate this situation specifically, but obviously we need to look at some other situations potentially where there's, what was the intent of that prohibition, and do we want to, if we're going to make a prohibition stand, then what are the lateral moves sideways for someone who does own property, and how those properties are treated in the future? Because that is not specifically outlined in the ordinance itself. So it does leave us as an interpreter, I say us, Pat and myself, with very little wiggle room, per se, when we're giving someone a recommendation, especially to your corridor commission. I think that's pretty much all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Callender, and I think that covers you too, Patrick, or would you like to add something?
Well, I would just say that having been here since we passed the ordinance and while we were writing it, I can understand the lawyerly gymnastics. I truly appreciate them actually, and enjoy listening to the reasoning that people come up with. But I believe the intent of the code when we wrote it was to allow for the survival of such situations, but not for the proliferation or the expansion of that type of development. Due to the fact that we had such a large amount of it at the time, what we were trying to do is keep it from increasing, not necessarily punishing anybody who has property that was in that condition at the time, just simply not allowing it to grow. And if it were to be modified, that'd be modified in the direction that the ordinance prescribed. So that's one thing. As far as strict interpretations, yes, we are kind of limited on well, actually, we have no leeway. I don't know any other interpretation other than a strict one of the word prohibited. That's why we had to make the recommendation that we did. Now, the commission, they have the purview to take our recommendation or not, but our recommendation had to be what it was.
And I respect that. And I know that you are charged with going by the regulations put before you and voted on by council. And I never like to see us pitted against you in the sense of we appreciate you and we appreciate the time you spent on this and the diligence in trying to do the right thing by way of the written word that we have proposed, voted on, and presented to you and to the citizens. But in this case, I think that I have to go along with the fact that this is a large parcel. It is not visible from the road to any degree, and because of the neighboring properties, it will not be out of sorts with what is already there. And I contend that it is 2 lots.
Okay.
Or 2 parcels.
So, okay, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Bradley, a second by Mr. Garrett. I think we've probably beaten this to death. Kind of know where we're going with this vote, but at least we had the discussion, and I appreciate each of you for taking part. All in favor to overturn the veto, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes.
Mayor, before you leave the subject, since that has passed, and you brought Mr. Calendar's email.
Yes, sir.
I was not going to bring that up in public, but I'm very concerned with one of the comments that Mr. Calendar made in his email when he refers to telling people that they've got to comply unless you're politically savvy and connected to the right people. I think he's making a comment concerning this council that we might be only responding to people that are politically connected or to the right people, and I'm feel that very much of an insult from a staff member to this council, and I just want to make that a public statement.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your saying that. I've heard the same.
I would hope that Mr. Probst would take appropriate action concerning that.
Yes, sir.
I concur.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. I appreciate it. Moving to public hearing, rezone for 0 Double Springs Church Road. Mr. Kelly.
Sorry, bear with me here. As you stated, this is a rezone for that location at the southwest corner of Double Springs Church Road in Cedar Ridge. They're seeking a rezone from R1 to R1A. Recommendation is for approval with the 7 conditions listed and any that the council might entertain or add.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any questions for Patrick? Excuse me.
And all the items that he noted have been addressed at this point in his plan review.
They have agreed to those
Right.
conditions.
Okay.
Okay, I'll declare this portion of the meeting open. Is there anyone here in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this rezone? Yes, sir. Mr. McDaniel, thank you for coming.
We have met with Mr. Jacoby and his team, Tyler, and I appreciate their time that they took out to go out of their way to meet with us. And
One moment, Mayor. Is this someone in opposition?
This
no, it's not. It's just a contingency that we've agreed upon. I want to make sure it gets into the
Okay, we can't.
approval.
But we need to get the applicant to have an opportunity to speak first.
Okay.
The applicant to the rezone request needs to have the opportunity to present first. Whether you're in favor or against, the applicant gets the floor first, up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Appreciate your patience. Yes, sir. Your name, please?
Hi, good evening. My name is Tyler Lasser with Alliance Engineering and Planning at 299 South Main Street. That's Alpharetta, Georgia. Joining me tonight is the developer, Jim Jacoby, with Parkland Communities. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for those who came out to the community meeting. We think it was very productive, and we think it kind of gave everybody a better understanding of our good intentions with this project. Can we hand out a few site plans
Yes,
to
sir.
all the council members?
Yes, sir.
It's all right.
So what you have in front of you is a trip generation report from Kimley Horn. You also have just a color rendering of our proposed development, a version of the project if it were to stay as R1, and also our just proposed site plan, which is right behind you as well. But just to get into a little bit more tonight, Park and Communities requests to rezone this roughly 83-acre lot from R1 to R1A to construct a 141-lot single-family community featuring a luxury amenity area, pocket parks, and abundant open space. The site is, of course, located at the southeast corner of Cedar Ridge and Double Springs Church and will be accessible from both roads. As proposed, the community will consist of two different sections, if you will. In the northwestern corner, you'll find 34 age-targeted ranch homes. These lots will be a minimum of 80 feet wide and 10,000 square feet, with homes starting at 1,800 square feet in size. The other lots will be a minimum of 90 feet wide, featuring homes that are two-story, and a minimum of 2,400 feet in size. These dimensions will, of course, vary, but that's the absolute minimum size. All homes will include a minimum two-car side entry garage and will be constructed using a mixture of materials, including brick, stacked stone, and various fiber cement sidings. The current zoning district, R1, requires a lot width of 100 feet. So as R1A, we would only be reducing the lot width by 10 feet for about 75% of the lots, it's 107 lots, and only 20 feet for those ranch lots, which is about 25%, and 34 lots total. This brings me to a point I'd like to emphasize. The slightly smaller lots that are permitted in R1A would allow us to cluster lots and provide more open space and avoid encroachment as much as possible into the site's wooded and environmentally sensitive areas. Under the proposed zoning district, over 29 acres, or 35%, would be devoted to open space. So this includes the creek and buffers, of course, the areas noted adjacent to the creek on the east side of the site, the area along the western property line, which acts as a buffer to the adjacent subdivision, the 25-foot wide landscape strip along both road frontages, which also includes a berm and nice shrubs and trees, and the large patch of buildable land at the southern end of the site, which you can see very clearly on the site plan. It's very densely wooded and includes streams as well. This is about eight-ish acres of buildable area. And that's buildable area with the streams and buffers. It's a bit larger than that. And if approved, as we're proposing, it would include a mulch trail. If the site were not approved, which is the second site plan that you have with you in front right now, under the current zoning district with 100-foot wide lots, 158 lots could fit on the site, which is 17 more than what we're proposing right now. And that would increase the density to 1.9 units per acre. In this scenario, it would be necessary to clear and build in or around those proposed open spaces. As you can see on the plan, we would be able to fit lots at the southern end of the property, which would of course require plenty of clearing and a stream crossing. And we wouldn't be able to provide those open space areas along the road frontage, that western property line, just those in addition to the areas that I had mentioned previously. So again, the intent is to really avoid unnecessary encroachment into those environmentally sensitive areas and preserve as much open space as possible. In this instance, it's necessary to provide slightly smaller lots in order to do that. The last thing I want to mention, since the last time we were here in October, it's been a while, we had a trip generation report done by Kimley Horn, which is in front of you as well. The report states that the community, under the proposed zoning district, would generate 260 or 20% fewer daily trips than if it would be the existing zoning. That's due to a few factors, to name a few, just less units as proposed, and the age target that we're also proposing in that northwest corner. Other than that, we do agree with all staff's recommended conditions. I think some of the folks here wanted to add a few conditions, which we're open to hearing, but I believe one we would like to add, and I think it would kind of, everybody would agree with this one. The development plans shall be in substantial conformance with the submitted site plan. So we believe that will cover all of the general design requirements that we're proposing, including the open space and general layout. Other than that, if you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer.
Is it, you're proposing 35% open space?
Yeah, so that's what we're showing on the plan right now. It's kind of just the general, what we believe is the open space. We don't want to have a specific number as a condition, but we'd absolutely be open to having that substantial conformance condition that kind of just covers what we are showing on the plan.
And Tyler, I'm sorry, could you spell your last name, please?
Lasser.
That was close.
Yeah.
Get that, Ms. Kirk? Thank you. Mr. Jacoby?
I have a question. Wait.
No, either. They're both here.
Well, in reading over this, I mean, I like all the things you're proposing to do with the side entry garages and the green space reservation and that sort of thing. Your recreational amenities are vague. Can you be more defined? Because you said 3, and you said basketball goals, soccer, or volleyball court, or maybe a pool. I mean, there's a big difference there.
You wanna,
My name is Jim Jacoby of Parkland Communities. Yes, ma'am, what we plan on building is exactly what we have shown here, which is a cabana, pool, a tot lot, and a play field.
Okay.
That's what we plan on building. And in addition, we are going to would like to put in some mulch trails in our preserved area that we have in the back of the property. That area is really the heavily forested, old growth property area. The majority of the property is really horse pasture, except for that back part, which is where all our specimen trees are on this property. So we think that'd be a really good amenity, passive amenity for the residents. One thing I would like to just clarify, on this site plan, what qualified as 35% open space, we basically took everything all area outside of the lots and the right-of-ways, qualified that as open space. So for example, the detention ponds is included in that overall area. And so if we start subtracting out the detention ponds, or if we subtract out a buffer, or subtract out a parking lot, then that starts willing it down. So, so I've worked very well with the community, and I compliment them. They've been great to work with. I've done a lot of zonings and worked with a lot of homeowner groups, and it was actually a pleasure to work with them. So we would like to also add a condition that says a maximum of 141 lots, just to give everybody confidence that we're not going to try and pull a bait and switch and do something different. We've also agreed with the community that we would have no more than 20% rentals, and so we'd also like to have that included as well.
That's correct. Are there any other questions?
And no less than what percentage of green space? You'd have to reserve 20%, is that right?
I think the code requires 15%. So if we have to, how about let's just settle a minimum 30% per the code, let Pat, and then we're going to really drill down on it, because it's a little bit subjective in there. So what I don't want to do is we start moving forward with engineering, and there's a gotcha in the code that just wasn't addressed, and so that would now I got to go lose 5, 6, 7 lots just to accommodate more open space. If you could,
Similar to the last discussion.
That's right. So if I had some wiggle room, that if down the road in engineering we had some surprises, we don't have to come back and readdress this later. We just go ahead and take it now. But my full intent is I want to do this site plan that we have here.
So not less than 35% or 30%?
30%. 30% open space, and I think we can make that work with the interpretation that they'll have. So we'll figure that out.
Thank you. There any
Mr.
questions?
Calendar, I'd like to hear what he has to say about that.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to know what you're thinking on that 30% no less than.
I know this is something that they're offering. It certainly could be a simple worded condition that just says that site shall have no less than What was the minimum you were comfortable with, 20%?
I'd be willing to do 30%. I mean, we're stating 35% on this plan, but I just need 5% of wiggle room. And so, just to make sure once we start engineering, we're good.
I mean, that could be an added condition to your question.
Okay.
Okay. Council, anyone else?
All these trees that you have for each of the lots, you intend for those to be there as well? These are trees, correct?
Yes, sir. The street trees, yes, sir. We plan on planting street trees in the community as well. And just so, we also have had our arborists go out to the site, and we've already located all the specimen trees. We've already done an ALTA survey on the property, geotechnical property, phase 1 environmental. Got all wetlands, wetlands, creeks, streams, everything located. So what you're looking at here is very precise, other than we just don't have full engineering drawings prepared yet.
Do we have anything in our code that dictates, based on the number of lots, the size of the pool to be constructed?
We do not have any parameters that prescribes that, no. And I would also mention too about the open space, if I have the opportunity. The exclusions that we have in our environmental section of the Code of Ordinances wouldn't probably create more than a 5% exclusion that he's concerned about. So that's slopes and detention ponds and other things like that, that wouldn't be usable for open space anyhow. Those exclusions probably won't cause a greater change than that.
Mr. Probst?
Yeah, I just wanted to hone in on item number 7, the fully executed development agreement. So just so everybody's clear, we will continue to work on a development agreement that will have some developer contributions for the water, sewer, traffic infrastructure that is needed for not only this development, but the one across the street that has also been tabled, to try to get an appropriate dollar amount, but a fair dollar amount with this developer and the other.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacoby. And Mr. McDaniel, I know you've all had your discussions. Paul, would it be acceptable to ask him about what we were discussing and then ask for agree and disagree, or?
Well, if the applicant has presented all they wish to present, the appropriate context would then be to, in the normal limited course, take comment from anybody who wants to speak in favor of the rezone request, and then take comment from anyone that wants to speak in opposition. So just taking that normal learning.
And then visit Mr. McDaniel.
He would need to speak during one of those two.
Okay.
I don't know that it would make much difference which one he speaks in, if, he's kind of in between, but he needs to speak
there. They've kind of come to an agreement. So let's say in favor, and would you like to speak with what you've agreed?
With conditions.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I can just, one moment, sir, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you twice tonight. One thing I just want to throw out there for the council to consider, particularly with the applicant, and I'm sorry I missed you before he sat down, but he has applied for a rezone request, which is totally fine within his purview, but just want to make sure the council is clear and that the applicant is clear. Your moratorium that was passed still is a moratorium on the acceptance of preliminary plats. So that moratorium, any action that you may take tonight, should you choose to rezone this request, would not impact the status of that moratorium as it relates to this project. Just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, and that's on the record.
All right, before you say anything else, you ready? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes, again, didn't see Jim back here. I feel like I can tell you a person's name, we've met enough, but we did agree with it in the 20% rental property was one of our top priorities, in the 35% of the space. The thing that I want to make sure is that if this is entered in, is that it goes along with the plat, even if Jim decides to sell his business to somewhere else or sell this, that it does not get changed. But more importantly is that this is incorporated into the homeowners association, whoever that is part of, because if it's a 5-year, 10-year, whatever that looks like, that it's not going to be changed after a year, that we stuck with it, and then, it's now we can have 50% rental properties. So that was our big concern. The other concern is it does not necessarily have to do with these properties. I just we can talk about traffic. I appreciate you discussing traffic, but I've done my own studies using some of the data that Jim has provided, and with his community, is not going to really impact the two roads as much as it is the other ones that are on the table today. I can,
Right, this one is this site-specific only.
all right, well, that's all I got then.
Okay,
right, thank
thank you, Mr. McDaniel, appreciate you coming in. Are there any questions? I'm sorry, is there anyone here to speak against the rezone? Hearing none, I'll declare that portion of the meeting closed. We'll revisit that in just a few minutes.
Question
You do?
for that.
Okay, we do have a question for the applicant, I'm sorry.
Mr. Jacoby, do you plan to set up an HOA and covenants for this development and pass that on to the homeowners once it's 75% built out?
Yes, ma'am, we will have an HOA, and it'll be a covenant protected community. We don't do it at 75%. We usually do it once the last house is sold, and there's a handover process with the homeowners.
And that would need to follow the development plans and be a part of for any,
That runs with the property.
if you were to assign this property to another.
Yes, you would want to make that a condition of the rezone, that any of these conditions, particularly the one about the rental that I heard,
Yes.
be part of the HOA, and that can also be part of the development agreement that was referenced in, I believe, condition number 7, that the development agreement can require review and approval of the HOA by staff prior to plat approval.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Jacoby.
I have a question for my own clarification. So you were saying that this does not affect the moratorium. You're saying because this was submitted prior to, is that?
No, I'm saying that this application is an application for rezone. It is not an application for preliminary plat approval.
Okay.
So it will be rezoned should we choose to rezone it. But then their ability to apply for a preliminary plat approval they are not capable of applying for one preliminary plat approval until the expiration of that moratorium.
Okay, thank you.
Before I jump the gun, are there any other questions? Okay, I'll declare that portion of the meeting closed. Moving to new business, we need an election of a vice mayor, please. I need a motion.
Nominate Mr. Larry Bradley.
Mr. Larry Bradley by Mr. Nathan Little. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Norman Garrett. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Ms. Crawford. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Welcome to year number 3. Moving to appointment of council representative to the DDA. I will need a motion to appoint Ms. Myosha Crawford as council representative.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Garrett to approve and a second by Mr. Larry Bradley. On the discussion part, just so you know, Ms. Malcolm has offered to be the alternate in the event that Ms. Crawford is unable to show, and I believe they discussed that yesterday, correct?
We did.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Congratulations, Myosha, I appreciate you. Moving to the rezone of 0 Double Springs Church Road. I'll open the floor to council members only for discussion and/or action.
Move to approve.
Have a motion by
rezone
Mr. Dickinson to approve the rezone. Is there a
with the
second?
conditions as stated.
Motion to approve with the conditions as stated. And,
That is to rezone to 1A, is that correct?
yes, sir. And those points would be addressed in the development agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We'll address all those points as conditions and within the development agreement.
Okay, and I have a motion by Mr. Dickinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the final plat approval for Meadows Farm subdivision. Mr. Kelly?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant has applied for final plat approval. The project has been built per the development plans, and we recommend approval as submitted.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Patrick?
For Brian, who's not here, when do you plan to serve them with transformers? Do you have any updates?
I think that neighborhood has all of its
they have it.
transformers installed.
Meadows Farm has all transformers set and installed.
Is this on 83, on Church Street? Okay.
They paid for theirs some time ago. We got the order in, got them set before the supply chain issues hit.
Oh, I was under the impression we couldn't deliver them.
Well, we can't for other neighborhoods right now.
Okay.
A lot of those are on hold, but Meadows Farm is in place.
Okay.
Good. Are there any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. David Dickinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nathan Little. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to the final plat approval for the Monroe Pavilion, Mr. Kelly.
Yes, sir. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. We had come prepared to recommend approval as submitted, but we're going to need to, due to some safety concerns, we want to recommend approval contingent upon verification of some development requirements that are still lacking, signage, signal verification by the DOT, and some stormwater concerns that were brought to my attention by Streets Transportation. If we could approve that, contingent upon that, we will verify that in the morning. I believe they should be able to have that, the public safety concerns, including fencing around the stormwater ponds, signage and signals, if that's possible.
Yes, so, yeah, essentially, we're asking for approval contingent upon these items Mr. Kelly mentioned. In addition, we're gonna have to go through the performance bonding and the maintenance bonding. Mr. Rosenthal has that paperwork. I don't see any major issues on it, but he just wants to go through the form. But again, we're trying to essentially help out and fast track this development, but we want to do it in a safe manner for the public, for ingress egress, because this is going to be a public parkway. So we still have some items to check off, especially in the morning. And my conversations with Mr. Argo over the past few weeks, it is going pretty fast, but we're not 100% yet in our comfort level to be able to check off on these items. We're very, very close. After we get through those safety elements, hopefully we can check those off tomorrow or the following day. But then everything else will be deferred through that performance bonding agreement that we have, that he has submitted, and we'll go through as well.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so if you're going to consider approving the final plat, we'll just want it to be approved subject to these conditions being met, and we'll want to list those out. And one of them is approval of, I just got the bond forms, and I think we are going to have to make some changes on them based on what I've seen. Because again, remember, when you approve the final plat and it's signed off on, then it's your street, right? So it's their street right now, and but it's missing some things. So if you're going to approve it, then it would be subject to certain conditions being met before it be signed off on by staff and then ultimately the mayor. One of those we would want to be a condition that all of the bonding paperwork is reviewed and approved by our office, because it just came in right at the end of the week on Friday, and I was out Friday and yesterday, and go Dogs, by the way. And just a little bit this morning. And you probably wouldn't want me to review it tonight, because I don't think that
So you want me to list the
we'll
other?
wait much longer. But in all seriousness, we need those but just to clarify this, because I know staff has been working very hard with Mr. Argo and the team, and I know their team's been working very hard. But the conditions that Mr. Kelly has highlighted, I want to make sure we get them right. Those are the conditions that have to be met, in addition to the bonding documentation being in acceptable form and approved by our office. And those are the conditions that will be met to allow the final plat to be signed off on and approved. That doesn't mean that there aren't still other things that have to be done to satisfy Mr. Kelly's metrics in terms of code compliance, development regs, building regs, issuance of certificates of occupancies. This is simply y'all approving the final plat subject to certain delineated conditions being met, particularly ones that address road safety and watershed, stormwater management issues.
So then can we just make a motion to approve with staff's conditions?
Yes, but we need to make sure they're clear because
me to
there's been several emails going around that address a lot of things that are not. If I'm hearing it correctly from Logan and from Pat and from Mr. Argo, there's a lot of things still left to be done. But the conditions that are necessary in order to get the final plat signed off on is a shorter list, and they are safety specific. So I want to make sure we just get those exactly right.
So what I will prefer, and this may need to be tag teamed by Logan and Patrick, if one of you would make the recommendation to approve with the conditions as follows, and then let these two jump in with those exact conditions, and then we'll have a second and vote if that's fair with you.
Yeah, if Mr. Kelly can just tell us the conditions specifically that he wants.
Sure. The conditions that are necessary for public safety concerns are street signage, traffic control signage, signalization at Charlotte Rowell Boulevard and Highway 11, some sort of verification from the DOT that they've signed off on those, and streets and transportation at Charlotte Rowell Boulevard. Fencing around the stormwater ponds for public safety. One of them keeps a full pool of 9 feet at all times, so that's significant. And then, of course, the bonding approval, which Logan mentioned, and all.
Okay, so I heard 4.
Did you have anything else?
No, that's the complete short list that we would need. Everything else would defer to the bonding.
Okay.
Do all of these things have to be met prior to any opening of any stores?
Yes,
Yes.
we won't be able
Yes.
to issue a certificate of occupancy until the final plat's recorded.
And that will, many of those things will be noted on the final plat as well, is that right?
These items?
Will
Yes.
they?
These will have to be taken care of before we can
Yeah,
sign off on.
we're hoping to wrap these things up tomorrow so that there's not any significant delay.
Yeah.
But-
That's dependent on their ability to do so.
And we're going through this exercise tonight because we don't have a meeting for another month. So
But-
that's why it's contingent.
But just to clarify, Mr. Bradley, what you mentioned, there are other items that are to be completed, and y'all are not making a decision about certificates of occupancy, just to be clear. That is for staff to make when the building is safe, when all the other metrics are. Now, it does allow them with the performance bond to some of these other things, like some of the landscaping and all that, then he could say that could be done in time with the performance bond in place. But y'all are approving the final plat subject to the safety conditions. I heard 4 conditions, basically the striping and the road signage being in place for the safety of the road, the signalization being GDOT approved, and then the fencing around the stormwater units. There's 2 stormwater ponds, and then the bonding requirements being approved by my office, bonding and surety requirements being approved by my office. Those are the 4 conditions that I heard, if someone wants to make that condition. But just to be clear, though, you're not addressing certificates of occupancy, or if there may be things that need to be finished in the future. But the final plat is a necessary in order for them to get that CO.
The certificate of occupancy cannot be issued until after this is done, though, correct?
Correct.
So then the motion needs to be moved to approve with staff stated conditions.
Absolutely.
I move to approve with staff stated conditions.
There you go, Tyler. Have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dickinson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes one step closer. Moving to the first reading of the procedural ordinance and resolution readings, Mr. Probst or Mr. Rosenthal, or both.
So, yeah, I'll take this one, and this is so that you don't have to keep hearing me read so much. So, your charter is written in a very unique way that it literally states that all ordinances shall be read at 2 meetings. There's several different versions of charters out there, and so we spent some time on this with some other city attorneys in the area, and this is just to save time, but to still be fully transparent. So it just simply mandates, I'll read the ordinance here in a minute, and hopefully it'll be one of the last ones I read for a while, but it just simply states that these ordinances that are to be read, they'll be published on the websites, they'll be made available, there'll be summaries by staff, but the literal reading will not be required of them unless any one of you requires it. And then if any one of you requires it, then it will receive the full literal verbal reading at a council meeting. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, and then I'll read this ordinance and then read it again next month, and then that will obviate the need to do so in the future unless y'all choose otherwise. All right, this is an ordinance of the mayor and council of the City of Monroe, Georgia, to limit the full and complete oral reading of city ordinances and resolutions at city council meetings. Whereas the City of Monroe has been vested with substantial legislative power to adopt clearly reasonable ordinances, resolutions, or regulations relating to its property affairs and local government for which no provision has been made by general law, and whereas Section 2.05C of the city charter permits the city council to adopt rules and bylaws to govern the conduct of its business, and whereas Section 2.12 of the city charter requires that each ordinance shall be in written form and read at a minimum of 2 meetings of the mayor and council except in emergency situations before being voted upon, and whereas the city desires to limit the full and complete oral reading of the entirety of city ordinances and resolutions to be considered at city council meetings, and whereas the mayor and council are aware that matters to be considered by them at their called and regular meetings, including proposed ordinances and resolutions, will be properly posted to the city's website and other required forms of communication available to the public prior to the meetings in accordance with the Georgia Open Meetings Act by city staff, and that with such public posting, the citizens of Monroe and those concerned with matters to be considered by the mayor and council will have opportunity to review and read ahead of time any proposed items to be considered by the mayor and council. And whereas such opportunity prior to the meetings of the mayor and council to review proposed ordinances and resolutions obviates the need to orally read the entirety of each proposed ordinance and resolution while still affording the public an opportunity to be well informed of the proposed actions of the mayor and council. Now therefore be it ordained that the mayor and council of the City of Monroe do hereby declare and adopt this ordinance as follows. Number one, the preamble of this ordinance shall be considered to be and is hereby incorporated by reference as if fully set fully out herein. Number two, the full and complete textual oral reading of future city ordinances and resolutions before the mayor and council for their consideration shall not be required, but may be summarized by the title of the proposed ordinance or resolution and the substance of the same to be considered by the council contained therein by city staff upon the presentation of the same to the mayor and council. Whereas number three, upon motion made by the mayor or any one city council member without the need of a second or vote on the same, to request a full and complete textual oral reading of any ordinance or resolution under consideration by the mayor and the council, the ordinance or resolution shall be read aloud in its entirety at the same city council meeting. Number four, this ordinance shall become effective upon its adoption. This constitutes the first reading this 11th day of January, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions, comments? Motion? Oh, that's the first reading. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Moving to district items. Anything out of any of your districts?
I just got one comment, I guess, and the comment I hear more from anyone complain, if you will, or concern from anyone today, seems to be speeding. And I've talked to Chief Watts about it, but I know we've got some of the streets we're going to attack soon. And Mr. Boyce, a couple of your streets, one of them at least overlaps with mine, so I'm getting people from both, and that's McDaniel and Pinecrest. That I get continuing calls and things on those, and I don't know. I know we've talked about things we can do for traffic calming, I can do, or whatever, and I know that's a real issue there, and I've talked to Chief Watts, and I know we can't just put police over there either, so I'm just going to encourage both the police department and city staff to look at what else we might do on those two streets, because that's
We are looking at that as phase 3, traffic calming. We got a lot of good public comment during that public information meeting a couple months ago. Our engineers are working on some concepts. There's 2 challenges, and one of those is just what type of device will satisfy everybody and work in those locations. And the other is funding, because those are larger stretches of streets, McDaniel and Pinecrest both. So we'll see what they come back with here in the short term.
Yeah, I know it's one of the concerns on McDaniel is on being closest, just past Pinecrest, that stretch there, and I know that's a challenge because of hills and curves on what can be done. But it is I think it's becoming a health hazard of the way people are speeding on those streets, particularly, those.
And with Pinecrest getting that new top coat, it's,
Oh, now, we've got
Yeah.
new pavement on Pinecrest, so now you can go faster.
any other comments from your districts? Mr. Garrett?
I have, well,
I'm just gonna come around, if you don't mind.
I mean, I've had complaints about City Hall being closed again. And I think we just need to express to the public the reasoning behind that and let them know that, as I understand it, is temporary.
It is very temporary. We had it back open. We want it back open, but, I mean, as of today, we have, 3 directors out for COVID. I would say probably 20% or more of this building has been affected with COVID in just the past 2 weeks. So as soon as we can get over this hump, we'll open the doors back up. We've made some amendments in City Hall, especially in our downstairs, about how we're doing customer service. We've got our code downstairs, so it should be a more customer-friendly environment, kind of a one-stop shop when people come in, so they're not looking all over the building for different functions. So we have done that. We're ready to get the doors back open as soon as we can kind of get everybody back in and healthy again.
I do have a quick question for Danny. He had got a call tonight too about trash being thrown off on Magnolia Street. Did you ever get a chance to see if we can get any cameras over there?
Yeah, Steve Lavender is the one.
Okay, thank you.
We're gonna put up a sign, he marked it, so should have a sign put up.
Okay.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Gregory?
One thing, actually, I got hit with several things like just over the past couple of days, so I'm fresh. One of the things was just fiber. When is it coming? People, and I explained that we are, looking at delays with equipment being delivered as everybody is, but people are anxious to have and see that. The other thing is sidewalks down Alcovey, and Logan and I have discussed that as well, but, from my understanding, the last thing I understood was that probably after the bypass is when we would see more sidewalk projects being attempted, or, so is that correct still?
It's, those are big ticket items.
Right.
So if you remember, we tried the T-Splost.
Right.
Last year or so. Didn't work out. That would have definitely helped cover some of those items.
So a T-Splost is a great thing to vote for if you want sidewalks, is that correct?
That can definitely assist.
Okay,
Definitely
all right,
assist.
so just,
So on those projects, what I think we should be doing is paying attention to what you've already allocated funding for. Eastbound on-ramp, westbound on-ramp, some of these other state program projects that we have some matching leverage on. Everything that we've got in the pipeline, let's get those clear, then we can reset for some of these other big ticket items. We've got the traffic calming elements that are also important. Yeah, hopefully that we can get to in the next couple years. I think it is a high priority. Just studying it, there were 3,000 or 4,000 people within that quadrant of the city that could actually use those sidewalks.
Yeah.
So it is something that's on the radar.
Thanks. And then the last thing I have is that I've had some citizens who, well, they live on Walker, and so they're on one end of Walker, and they're getting hit with Marshall stuff, hey, make sure you're cleaning this up in your yard and doing this and that. But they're confused because then they go to the other end of Walker, and they see some, maybe a pallet fence or something like that, stood up in a yard. And so they're wondering, and I don't have the answers to those questions. I'm not saying anybody's doing a good or bad job, but I'm just saying they're curious as to how they're getting hit with stuff in their yard when it's probably, some pipes or whatever laying there that need to be picked up versus structures that have issues or that appear to have issues that they would think would be more pressing. And so just bringing that to attention and just saying, if those are things, however that operates with code and with the marshals, people are asking those type of questions, and I'm not really sure how to address it, but I just wanted to bring it to attention.
Mr. Kelly, do you have any?
Mr. Kelly,
I would just say, Walker Drive is being addressed holistically from end to end. The people who you're speaking with are probably more responsible citizens than the people who are failing to comply, but I can assure you they're all being addressed. It may take a little bit longer. People who are responsible and respond immediately,
their problems go away quickly. People who don't, we wind up in taking them to court after citations, and that takes a little longer to unfold. So being a responsible citizen makes you look like you're being targeted, but the other people are getting the same treatment, they're just not complying.
And that's actually what I offered up as well, and I assumed that was the case. I know, and so I want to say thanks to all the citizens that do comply, and sorry that, you gotta deal with that as well, but thank you very much for having your guys on it, and obviously treating everybody fairly. Thank
Yes, sir, thank you.
Any issues, just pass those along to us as staff, and we'll address it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Dickinson?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Boyce? No, sir. I'm sorry, Ms. Crawford, I totally went by you. Any comments from your district?
Yes, the comments I'm getting is about Center Hall being open. When is the public going to officially open? And the price of food parking lot plaza, why is it so dark? It needs to be more lighting in that plaza.
What parking lot?
The plaza, probably the food plaza.
Quality food.
I don't know how to address that. Hang on one second, Ms. Crawford. It's private, right? That's a private lot. It can bring it to the attention of the owner. Would you pass that along, please, Mr. Kelly?
Yep, I'll be happy to.
Thank you. And then you heard about City Hall. We want to get that open as soon as we can, once we get through this round of COVID. It's hit us all pretty hard. And was there anything else?
And they were asking about the public. When is it going to officially open? What's the calls I'm getting about that as well?
Well, tonight was final plat approval with conditions, which would lead to their recording that in the next few days. And then Publix comes in and tells them all of their punch list items that are required, and then they pick the date, and they will let us know. So
okay,
we're having our fingers crossed that it could be next week, but it may be a few weeks from now. We'll keep you in the loop. We'll keep everybody in the loop as soon as we have an actual day.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Boyce?
No, sir, I don't have anything.
All right. Glad you're here, man. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Mr. Little? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I add one more thing? Mr. Wilson was sitting here, so it reminded me of something. One thing is just loud vehicles in general, and I know that as we seek to have a downtown where people are walking and hanging out and being out in the open air, while we're excited about the bypass and the trucks, Pat has talked to me about some things that have been passed in other towns around us. So I don't know if we're interested in that, but just loud vehicles around and about. That's people have complained to me about that. So I'm bringing that.
To me as well.
We've heard that.
Experience it too.
Yeah, I mean it's hard when you're sitting out at Amici having a slice, and dude tears by and rips your head off with his muffler. So. Unfortunately, I'm getting old, it seems. It's like, these darn kids with their noises.
Patrick, if you have something that's worked in other places, you want to run it by us, that'd be great.
Sure, and again, recently Lawrenceville, I believe, passed a noise ordinance to address similar issues, so we could look at what they've got and modify it for ourselves and present it to you as a draft to see what you think about it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I want to run a few things by you on my update. I just had a couple of local businesses offer to do an I support the Monroe Police Department sticker that you would put either in your business window or in your automobile. They were talking about selling the silver stickers for $50 annually and the gold stickers for $100, and donate 100% of the profits, or 100% of the proceeds to our police department. Any comments? Your thoughts? I think that's kind of like just, hey, making a way to make a donation.
You say this was coming from business owners?
To local business owners.
I like the idea. I particularly like it if those business owners initiated it rather than the city.
Well, yeah, they did. They just wanted to know our thoughts, and I just think it sounds great. Do you see any problems with it? David, anything? Just a way to provide some additional funding for our PD to come up with community outreach. I think that would be their intent. So I'll tell them to give it a shot, and then I'll run those stickers or the picture of the stickers by you. Next, COVID testing. Working with a group called Free COVID Test Atlanta. It's federally funded. They are doing testing at Blaine Station on Thursdays. Felt very comfortable allowing them that space as it's not been redeveloped yet. They are doing the PCR test with 72-hour turnaround. It's 90% accurate. They do have the rapid tests that you can request, and those are only about 40% accurate. So they really prefer to do the 72-hour wait. But it's a federally funded program, and we've seen lines build up all over the Atlanta area. We opened it up last week officially to Nathan Franklin at the schools. He sent out an email to the Monroe cluster only because we didn't know how many folks were going to come clamoring for tests. We had 350 that day. They can probably handle 4 or 5 times that many. And if the numbers start really getting overwhelming, I figured one day is okay to try it. Would you have any issue with doing a second day or even a third? I think
it's great.
leave that up to RV and Logan, and they can tell us if it becomes too cumbersome.
We will have to work around some of the work going on at Blaine Station.
Right, and I think that this may not be a lasting issue if COVID takes a turn south. Number 5, and I'm going to come back to number, I've already said congratulations to Chaz, that's number 4. I appreciate you tonight. I appreciate your discussion and your input, and there are times when we have things that come in front of us that I'm afraid I don't ever want to jump the gun, and I just appreciate all of your input, and I think that will help Mr. Atha as he goes down the road, and our staff as well. And then finally, no matter how much it pains me to say it, congratulations to the University of Georgia. It was 14,986 days since their last one. So if they wait another 1,496 days, 986 days, if they wait that long again, I'm looking at 92 years old. So, I think that is probably a pretty good way to end the meeting. I will say,
Go Dogs.
I won't say that, but I will say that Julie Sams, who's come to visit us tonight, ultimate type fan, watched the game with friends in the big city of Monroe, and then went to ring the bell last night after the game, right?
You rode the bell. You didn't ring it. You were literally flying in the air, it looked like.
Well, congratulations, and I appreciate you doing that. And how many Georgia grads do we have in here?
Yeah, most of this group.
Go Dogs.
That's enough of you. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Gregory. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Good night. Thank you, everybody.